Tommy and Chrissy Buckley, married in their early 20s. This account of their story is based on the book by Tommy's brother John Joe, researched by Philly Fitzgerald, and my own personal memories, as I was one of their 7 children. Their relationship began through their mutual involvement with the Hibernian Player, the local drama group. First, I will deal with their individual life history up to then. Tommy was born in Capawhite in 1925. His father was local baker Paddy Buckley. His mother was Joanna, and he had one brother, John Joe. Many areas of the country were deprived. By 1933, the family had grown. Paddy and Joanna Buckley now had 5 boys and 1 girl. John Joe, Tommy, Jimmy, Pat, Joe and Mary Ita was the girl. Fine Gael, now Fine Gael, were working hard to maintain the Irish Free State government against the opposition of Fianna Fáil's de Valera and his nationalist agenda. Probably because Paddy Buckley was a Cork man, where their hero was Michael Collins, the Buckleys were staunchly Fine Gael supporters. But being raised in the environment of a busy shop just across from the church was a comparatively exciting childhood. Just above them was the school and the fair green. The mecca for entertainment, the travelling cinemas paid frequent visits, as well as the greatest circuses in the country like Fawcett's, John Duffy and the Great United American Circus. This excerpt, taken from John Joe's book, paints a picture of what their childhood was like. Capawhite, in those days, was an important place for showfolk, and they all visited the shop and the bakery. They would get water for themselves and the animals in the yard. We always had good relationships with the showfolk. The roar of lions and tigers was a sound as children we used to get at night when a circus was on the green. You could imagine that you were in the Serengeti National Park in Africa. My father then decided to buy a radio, or a wireless as they were called in those days. It was one of the first in Capawhite, and our house was always full of people when an All-Ireland hurling or football match was broadcast by Radio Athlone, as it was called in those days. Our house was always full of people. Card playing was very popular in our house. Sometimes we would have a hoolie, with my mother playing her melodeon, which she had since her teens. I started to learn to play it, and Mary Ita also. She used to play a popular tune then, When I Grow Too Old to Dream. My father was a good singer. His favourite song was Do You Want Your Lobby Washed Down? So we had a busy house, plenty of work, but music too. Music while you work. Despite all the cataclysmic events going on around the world, Capawhite was a thriving village with a great community spirit and a great place to grow up. On Church Street alone there was other shops, Harrington's, Goody's, Sam the Barber's, Fitzgibbon's Drapery and the Chemist's. There were other bakeries, of course. Timony's were operating, but only locally. The monthly fairs in Capawhite meant all the shops were very busy. In the 30s, myself and Tommy used to get Our Boys magazine and many other magazines that were published in London. Every Saturday, we would go into Tipperary town. Tommy would buy one called Adventure, and I would buy one called Film Fun. The 30s rolled into the 40s, and World War II, which was to have a big effect on everyone's life. Although Ireland was neutral, as regards supplies of almost all the things that people were used to, everything became very scarce. Flour in particular was hit very badly. These kept supplying their customers all throughout the war years. Tommy's talent as a salesman made a major contribution to the business. He pushed out the frontiers with new routes, like Hospital in County Limerick. He made contact with other flour suppliers through flour agents, Kellys of William Street, Limerick, who were our agents for a small flour mill in Clare, and we were able to top up our regular supply from going on Smith and Ranks. This meant we could expand, and shopkeepers were only too glad to get the extra bread. He then brought a small van, and the old V8 was only used a couple of times a week, so we had a good petrol rationed in. His next move was to buy a horse-drawn van for local routes like Hollyford, Donoghue, Doon, Anicarty, Dundrum, and shops outside these places, like Hayes of Newtown, Bilbo, and others. The horse-drawn van was ideal for these local runs, leaving the vans for big routes. He then bought an old lorry from Martin Hayes, and this meant we could collect flour where it was available. Mary Ita was just 19 when she married Thomas Coughlin in 1942. They opened up a pub, and it became a great success. Just across the street, there was an empty shop opposite Ned O'Dwyer's pub. It was closed before my time, and I could only remember it as an empty property, with bill posts advertising dances, shows, and circuses. In fact, it looked derelict. However, sometime in the late 40s, approximately, a butcher, Mr. Russell, bought it, renovated it, and started a butcher's shop. He decided to move again after a short time. One morning he walked into our house, and out of the blue, he asked my mother and me, who were the only two in the kitchen at the moment, if we would be interested in buying the property, saying he was going to put it on the market, but he thought he would sell privately, saving money, if he found a buyer, and he said he would give us first refusal. Well, we were surprised to say the least, as we had no intention of buying any place. We said we would have to consider it and have a family powwow. Well, to our surprise, we decided to buy it. I think we paid £400. It became the forerunner of a very successful wholesale business, which was to spawn one of the best-known cash and carries in the province. And as follows: a grocery store was opened in Russell's with Tommy in charge. In a short time, he developed it into a leading general store in the Capawhite area. Everything was well presented in the shop in a modern post-war way. With Tommy still developing the bakery sales, we had to have someone to manage Russell's. Enter Chrissy Fox, a young woman well known in Capawhite and a Hibernian Players star. Chrissy was to play a major role in developing the business. Everybody knew Chrissy, and Chrissy knew everybody. The shop went from success to success. So did the bakery. The bakehouse was now bigger and better than ever. We now got into the sweet trade, and this was really the start of the general wholesale that was to follow. The shop was doing great business. Bacon products were a speciality, and Tommy started to send sausages, puddings, rashers, as well as the sweets, in the vans. A very popular service with our customers, especially in North Tipperary, Rare Cross, Kilcommon, Upper Church, etc. Tommy and Chrissy were then married. They got down to building up the business that made the selling of the shop by Russell's the sale of the century. They then decided to extend the shop and bought Dodie White's house in Iron Mills, where they lived for a number of years with a growing family. Later they sold the property to Joe, who lived in it until he died at the early age of 47. They moved back to Capawhite. A store was then built on the Cashel Road, and also a dwelling house. The Buckley businesses provided employment to the town of Capawhite, and with the help of the local, very loyal, supportive and hard-working staff, Buckley supply stores became one of the biggest in Munster. As good as they were as business people, they were twice as good as parents. And that's another story I hope to cover in the next episode.
The moon was shining bright in Carolina. The night we said goodbye so tenderly. And now that I'm away from Carolina, won't someone tell the moon again for me? Carolina moon, keep shining, shining on the one who waits for me. Carolina moon, I'm pining, pining for the place I long to be.
John Joseph Buckley was born in 1851 at 2 Upper Kettle Market Street, Cork. The tragedy of John Joseph's life began when his first wife passed away, leaving him with 3 young children. More tragedy was to follow. As his second wife also passed away just 2 months before his own death. The woman's maiden name was Lynch. They had 2 girls and 1 boy. The boy, Paddy, would later go on to establish Buckley's Bakery, Cappawhite. John Joe got a job with Messrs. Desmond's, Couriers, Cork. He was only working a week when misfortune struck again. While taking his bus out of the yard, as he was going under an arch with 2 beams, he dropped his whip and looked for the conductor to pick it up. John Joe was sitting up in the box seat and lowered his head under the first beam, but forgot about the second one, as some of his hair and blood was found on this beam by Sergeant Joseph Brown. He had been knocked from his seat by the impact, and blood was flowing from 2 large cuts on his head. Although the jury found from the evidence that there was criminal negligence, a verdict of death from misadventure was pronounced. The Buckley children were separated and did not see each other for years. Paddy Buckley was sent to Greenmount Orphanage on the 30th of September 1901 at the age of 10 years. It was through the Christian Brothers that Paddy Buckley got his first experience of the bakery trade. He spent 4 years in Passage West and went to school there. Qualified as a baker, he left in 1907. Through the Christian Brothers, he then got a job at Higgins's Bakery, Emly, County Tipperary. When John O'Donoghue's premises opposite the church in Cappawhite came up for sale, he looked to Mr. and Mrs. Higgins for advice, as he needed 2 guarantors for the bank. From there began a business that will soon be celebrating its centenary, Buckley's Bakery, Cappawhite.